Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Today is probably part 14 of the 3-pound robot build. You may notice the robot is in the exploded view right now, and that's because I want to do a little 3D printing and work on the sides. Now, most recently you've seen me do a lot of lightning, which I believe we've gotten down to the 1323 grams, which you may not have seen some of these holes. I added the last row of holes, and I also created a Patreon, and that's where that video is. And I'm going to continue to add some more extra videos for Patreon, as well as some merchandise on Patreon. So if you'd love to support me and my projects, please check it out. I'll have a link in the description. Of course, right now there's only one video on there, but I'm going to be adding as many as I can. So stay tuned here and stay tuned there. Now, like I said, I want to work on these side pieces. Right now they're just 3D printed, very thin-walled. Ideally, I'd love to have them out of metal, but that's a high cost and a high weight, so I've recently been thinking about doing it more 3D printed style. So I don't think I would do PETG because, or I'm sorry, PETG as people like to refer to it, because it can be quite brittle when it's printed in thick chunks. And brittle is not good when you're getting hit by high energy robot weapons. So I'm just going to design it a little bit, and then I might give it a shot at doing the whole frame rail out of TPU. I might try it. But another thing to try that a lot of people do would be nylon, which I've never printed, but hey, I'll try anything once. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but this has the same mounting holes as the motor, as well as it has 4 raised circles that fit into these holes in the motor. So it fits quite snugly. It's pretty nice, but if you look, we're still sticking up probably at least a 1/16 of an inch more than I want, more than my design allows. So I need to increase the depth of this motor mount, and then we can sink that down in, and I'll print a prototype of that. All right, we got this off the printer. I printed this one with all perimeters, so it's solid. Got a little bit of crud out of my nozzle there. Self-cleaning, I guess. And in order for you to see the changes I made on this, let's pull this old piece out. Very tiny screws for the motor here. And there we go. All right, so from this side, it looks mostly the same, except you can see I added a little bit more material here. Now these screw holes on this one, the mounting holes for the motor, are supposed to be fully enclosed in plastic, but because I print with a 0.8 millimeter nozzle, that piece must have been smaller, so it did not get actually printed. Kind of went around it. So I solved that by sinking the motor in a little bit more, if you can see, and I made a little extra step there. So the front piece of the motor should still fit under that, and I don't need that whole C-clip exposed at all. As well as that change, I also did what I told you I was going to do, and I made the motor a little deeper. You almost can't tell, but you can tell that this is a little thinner than this. So if we compare, if you see the amount of motor that's sticking up here compared to if I put it on this one, see, much less. Now it's basically like flush mounted, so that's like perfect. Of course, before I install this piece, I need to post-process. I need to drill out all the holes a little bigger, and I've been tapping these holes. You know, I'm not sure what the solution is going to be if I end up going with plastic rails, because threads in plastic are, well, they tend to be pretty poor. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with that. But let's go drill out some holes so I can get this mounted. And you know what, just for the heck of it, let's weigh these and see what they are. So this is my very light prototype. Oh wow, it's 44 grams. It's heavier than I expected. And this is my printed solid. Less than 10 grams heavier, so that's not terrible. All right, let's go downstairs and clean up some of these holes. This drill bit is too small to fit into my drill press chuck, so I have a small little chuck that I sometimes use as a hand chuck. Then we're going to need a few M3 sized holes, a few M4 sized holes, and the M6 sized holes. One tip that I like to do is if you're using metric sizes and you're putting an M4 screw in a hole, if you drill the hole out to an M5, well, the drill that you would use for an M5, which is actually a 4.2 millimeter, makes it perfect for the fastener to sit in. So just go up one size, drill it out, and the fastener will go right through that hole. So those are all my holes for M5. I'm sorry, those are my holes for M4 fasteners, but I just drilled out with M5 top drill. I'm just going to do the big hole for the weapon, which I believe is a 5/16. You don't necessarily have to do this when 3D printing, but a lot of times your holes are not going to be perfectly sized, and they might not even be perfectly round. So if you want a little bit of accuracy, then you can undersize your holes and then drill them out to the perfect size. You know, I might take my tap upstairs and we can tap some holes up there. I got my M6 tap here. M6 is the only threaded holes that I have on here because I don't really trust anything smaller than that. And I have a little tool to help you tap straight, as well as my tap wrench. Plastic doesn't always tap like metal. Sometimes it gums up and balls up. But as you can see, I've got little flakes, so it's doing all right. One thing I like to do with the plastic, though, at least, is once the tap starts to come through, I like to peel these little pieces of plastic off, because the more you use the tap in the plastic, the more it starts to heat up, and the more the plastic starts to gum up. That's all there is to tapping. Drill the tap down and pull it back out. Sometimes on metal you have to go a little bit, come back, go a little bit, come back. But on plastic, it doesn't tend to get tight like that. Okay. Now I just have to repeat this a million more times. Of course, one thing I could do is potentially, if I'm going to stick with 3D printing, I could probably just make a little nut pocket and then use nuts on the back of these, which would probably be pretty smart because chances are the threads in plastic are going to pull out. But that will cost me a little bit more weight. So for now, I'm going to avoid it until I get these parts perfect. Now see, this hole goes all the way through, so unfortunately this tap is going to clog up with plastic and the threads probably won't be as good for this hole unless I stop and pull it out many times. Got it. Now I need a break. Little pieces of plastic everywhere. So we finished up this piece. Now let's get it installed. But before I do that, because I slightly changed the position of the motor, I moved it in slightly, and the wire channel in there is a little tight. I just want to make sure that we're not pushing on the motor wires. You know what? Instead of this, I'll use this one because it's nicer. That's okay. Yeah. Aha. Looks like my antenna got pinched under there. Good thing it wasn't the actual wire. Just short of it. Something to note, might be a nice idea to design a channel for the antenna somewhere, but might be overkill. I did run into this last time with this particular filament. It oozes a little bit, so the dimension of this needs to be sanded out a little bit, just a little, for me to get the right fit. All right, got to go downstairs and use the Dremel with a little sanding drum. Still more, just to be sure. Seems like it's fitting. Looks like the holes are a little misaligned. Need to rotate the whole motor a little bit, but it's kind of tight. So I'll do this. It's a little better. I don't know if you can see that, but these are really tiny screws, so you got to be real careful not to strip them. Going backwards first until you feel a little skip is usually the best way. One more. All right, everything looks good still. I don't know if you can see, but that's what I was worried about right there. But it still fits in the channel, so we're good. All right, as you can see, this is the new design around the motor, and that's what the old design looked like. Originally, I didn't want to have that thin piece of plastic covering the C-clip because that could potentially get cracked and jam into the C-clip, and then you have either massive friction or possibly the shaft becoming loose, neither of which are good, but overall, I don't think that's going to be an issue. Some more tiny screws, not quite as small as the drive motor screws, which, to be honest, I would love to re-tap the drive motor screws, but until they break, I see no reason to. So if you remember from earlier in this video, we had quite a lip sticking out there, and now we have almost flush. Maybe it's 1/100th of an inch up, maybe less. That's what we want. Because you couldn't really tell before, but these were actually being pushed out because I had designed it for the width of this sitting basically flush. We'll probably repaint this other side since I have more left of this clear PETG filament that I'm trying to get rid of. And I'll print this one solid so it's a little heavier. And then we can check the weight, but that'll probably be in the next one. So stay tuned. Hope you enjoyed.